Season 6 trailer for The Chosen just arrived, and it changed everything fans thought they understood about what this show is truly capable of. After 5 seasons of building something genuinely extraordinary, of watching Jesus and his disciples become the most deeply drawn, most emotionally layered characters in the entire history of biblical television, the moment that every single viewer feared and hoped for in equal measure has finally been revealed in all of its devastating, irreversible detail. Will Judas ever find any form of redemption in his final hours, or is his fate already sealed the moment he stepped away from that garden with 30 pieces of silver burning in his hand? What is the full emotional cost of the betrayal on someone like Peter, who swore before everyone seated at that table that he would never, under any circumstances, leave the side of the person he had called Lord? How does Mary, the mother of Jesus, carry herself with any composure through the most devastating hours that any mother could ever be asked to endure without breaking entirely? What happens to Mary Magdalene when the one person who restored her entire identity and gave her back her life is now being led away in chains toward a death that the whole city is loudly and publicly demanding? And what does it mean for the rest of the disciples, scattered in every direction, terrified, grieving, and utterly without direction, when everything they gave up their former lives to follow appears to be ending in the most brutal and visible way imaginable? Every single one of those questions is answered across this season, and this video is going to break all of them down in full before the November premiere. Before going any further, hitting the subscribe button and the like button right now means nothing from this channel gets missed, and this is absolutely not the season any longtime fan of The Chosen can afford to fall behind on. The single most important moment in the entire Season 6 trailer is the one that opens it, and it is completely silent and completely devastating in a way that nothing in the previous 5 seasons quite prepared the audience for. A beaten and bloodied Jesus looks upward, and there above him is Mary, his mother, looking down. For a few long seconds, there are no words exchanged, no dialogue, no swelling score. It is simply a son and a mother, separated by the worst thing that has ever happened to either of them, and the camera holds on that wordless exchange long enough for it to sink all the way in before anything else begins. It is genuinely terrifying in a way that even the most seasoned viewers of this show will not be prepared for, because after 5 seasons of watching Jonathan Roumie's portrayal build layer by layer into something truly extraordinary, the sight of that same face, the one that healed lepers, that wept openly at Lazarus' tomb, that called Matthew away from his tax collector's table with 2 simple words, battered, bloodied, and looking up into his mother's eyes, carries an emotional weight that no amount of mental preparation could possibly soften. Roumie himself described the experience of filming these sequences as the hardest thing he has ever done in his life, both professionally and personally, without any close second. He spoke openly of months afterward where simply attending Mass would reduce him to tears without warning, saying the experience left an indelible impression, that even sharing what he called a micron of a percentage of the Lord's passion in a dramatic context left him absolutely humbled, broken open, and moved in ways that stayed with him long after filming wrapped. The cast spent 3 full weeks filming the crucifixion sequences in Matera, Italy, and Jenkins described those 3 weeks as the most challenging and spiritually difficult period in the entire production history of The Chosen, saying it required him to surrender everything he had just to get through each individual day of shooting in that location. However, the situation across the rest of the trailer is far more complicated than even that shattering opening moment suggests, because the emotional devastation does not stay confined to one relationship, and the ripple effects of what is happening to Jesus reach every single character in the story in ways that are both deeply surprising and entirely specific to the years of careful groundwork the show has been laying since its very first episode. The most likely explanation for why this season is going to hit harder than anything The Chosen has ever produced comes down to a single creative decision that Jenkins made early in the writing process. A decision to treat the final 24 hours of Jesus' life not as a well-known story to be competently illustrated, but as a mystery to be excavated entirely from the inside out and given back to the audience in a form they have never encountered before. Jenkins said it plainly during the July 27th livestream. Everyone knows the basic facts of what happened on Good Friday, but not everyone knows the why, the extraordinary emotional and spiritual texture of those specific 24 hours, the internal experience of every person who was present, the grief and confusion and terror that was uniquely specific to each disciple and each bystander in ways that no previous adaptation has ever had the time or the accumulated emotional groundwork to explore in full. The evidence for this approach is visible everywhere in the trailer, in the shot of the disciples huddled together in fear and confusion with no clear direction, in the way Mary Magdalene watches Pontius Pilate address the crowd with an expression that holds grief and something harder and more complicated underneath it, in the way Jesus is shown praying to the Father before the scourging with a surrender that feels genuinely earned across 5 full seasons of watching him build toward exactly this inevitable moment. Jenkins described the season as the most important, biggest, and heaviest thing this show has ever attempted, and noted, surprisingly, that moments of pure joy appear in places viewers would never think to look for them in a season built around the crucifixion. And if this approach proves correct in execution, if Jenkins has genuinely found something new inside material the world has known for 2,000 years, the consequence for viewers who have followed The Chosen since its earliest beginnings is going to be enormous. This will not feel like witnessing a familiar event. It will feel like losing someone who mattered. The second theory worth examining in detail concerns Judas, and the trailer makes absolutely clear that his arc in Season 6 is going to be one of the most psychologically complex and emotionally demanding storylines the show has ever attempted. The evidence sits in a single image from the trailer that fans across every platform have been dissecting obsessively since the teaser dropped on July 27th. Judas, walking alone through an open field, carrying a noose. The show does not cut away from it. It does not soften the image or introduce any ambiguity around what it clearly means. And the fact that the trailer includes this so deliberately, after spending so much of seasons 3 through 5 building Judas, played with genuine and consistent depth by Luke Dimian as a deeply sympathetic, intellectually conflicted, tragically human person, rather than a cartoonish villain, tells the audience exactly where this is heading, and asks every viewer to sit with the full moral and emotional weight of it without any offered relief. The fan debate around Judas has been one of the most persistent and heated ongoing conversations in the Chosen community for years, whether he is ultimately a figure deserving of compassion, whether his visible remorse carries any final meaning in the moral accounting of the story, whether the show would use the creative freedom it has always exercised to do something genuinely unexpected with his ending. However, unfortunately, the trailer appears to close the door on any kind of last-minute narrative redemption, and the deliberate inclusion of that image in a carefully constructed 90-second teaser suggests the show intends to depict the end of Judas's story with the same unflinching specificity it is bringing to every other element of this season. The consequence of this, for viewers who have spent years defending Judas as a fully human and deeply understandable character rather than a simple instrument of evil, is going to be among the most painful things this show has ever asked its audience to accept. And that refusal to look away is precisely what makes this portrayal unlike anything before it. The third theory connects to something that has been quietly building since the very first scene of the very first episode of The Chosen, the relationship between Mary Magdalene and Jesus, and what it does to her sense of self, her rebuilt identity, and every piece of the new life she constructed after her healing, when she watches the person who called her back into herself be publicly condemned and led away to die. Elizabeth Tabish's portrayal of Mary Magdalene across 5 seasons has been one of the show's most consistent and deeply moving achievements, beginning in that very first episode with Jesus calling her name during the exorcism in a moment so quietly powerful that fans and critics have been citing it as one of the most affecting scenes in the entire series ever since the show first released. The belief here is that Season 6 will bring that arc full circle in a way that pays off every investment the audience has placed in that character across 6 years of television, and that the trailer's brief but deliberate shot of Mary Magdalene watching Pilate address the crowd from a distance is not background detail, but a deeply intentional storytelling decision, a reminder that she is present for every stage of this, that she does not turn away from any of it, and that her continued witness is going to matter in ways that Season 7 will make fully explicit when it moves into the resurrection. The consequence of this, if the show handles her arc in Season 6 with the same care it has brought to every aspect of her story from the very beginning, is that the moment in the final season where the risen Jesus calls her name again will land with a force that no viewer is going to be emotionally prepared for. Because the show has spent 6 full years making that single act of being called by name the quiet, emotional center of everything it has ever been building toward from its very first frame. While the main conflict of Season 6 dominates every frame of the trailer and every conversation in the fan community right now, there is another storyline quietly developing in the background that every long-term viewer of this show needs to pay serious attention to heading into November, and that is the story of Simon Peter. Shahar Isaac's portrayal of Peter has served as the emotional spine of The Chosen across all 5 previous seasons, consistently grounding the show's grandest theological moments in the specific lived experience of a man who is impulsive, passionate, fiercely loyal, and deeply human in all of his contradictions. Season 6 places him in the most impossible position of his entire arc. Peter is the one who swore, in front of everyone at the Last Supper, that he would never deny Jesus, who declared with total conviction that he would go to prison and go to death before he abandoned the person he had followed across every road and every confrontation for 3 years. And then, under pressure in the cold outside the high priest's courtyard, within a matter of hours after that declaration, he denies him 3 times to strangers gathered around a fire. Confirmed production details for Season 6 reveal that Episode 2 will feature Peter and John outside that very courtyard before the trial of Jesus even begins, placing Peter at the precise location where his denial will occur, which means viewers who have spent 5 full seasons watching Peter love Jesus with everything he has are now going to watch him break at the exact moment when holding was most required and most meaningful. This is the character the fan community is most genuinely divided on heading into Season 6, not Judas, whose fate carries a finality that closes debate, but Peter, whose failure is not an ending but a beginning, and whose full restoration remains still ahead in the final season. However, unfortunately, for the viewers who have invested most deeply in Peter's journey across these years, sitting through his denial after everything the show has built around his loyalty is going to be the single hardest sequence of the entire season to get through. After everything this trailer has revealed, the question every fan of The Chosen is now asking is the simplest and most important one of all. When does Season 6 actually arrive? The confirmed answer, taken directly from the official Prime Video announcement made on July 27, 2026, is that Season 6 premieres on November 15, 2026, with 3 episodes releasing simultaneously, to open the season in a binge launch that gives viewers the full opening arc from the first day. From there, new episodes roll out on a weekly schedule through December. Episode 4 on November 22nd, Episode 5 on November 29th, and Episode 6 on December 6. However, the most significant piece of information in the entire release calendar is what comes after December 6, because Season 6 does not conclude on any streaming platform. The season finale, the episode built specifically around the crucifixion and Jesus' final words from the cross, will receive a standalone global theatrical release on March 12, 2027, across dozens of languages simultaneously, marking a historic first for the series and a recognition that this moment in the story demands something more than a home viewing experience. Dallas Jenkins has been clear that the decision to send the finale to cinemas rather than streaming was not a commercial calculation, but a creative and deeply spiritual one. An acknowledgement that this particular story, the death of Jesus as witnessed through 6 years of character investment, demands to be experienced communally, in the dark, surrounded by other people who have been on the same journey. The crucifixion sequences were filmed over 3 weeks in Matera, Italy, the same location Mel Gibson used for The Passion of the Christ in 2004, and Jenkins described those 3 weeks in Italy as the most physically, emotionally, and spiritually demanding period in the show's entire production history, requiring him, in his own words, to surrender everything he had just to get through it. Season 6 was also partly filmed on a full-scale replica of Jerusalem built in Goshen, Utah, owned by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, across 86 days of total production. Based on every confirmed detail, the scale of the filming, the locations, the cast's own accounts of what they went through, Jenkins' description of the finale as a supersized cinematic event, and the 6 full seasons of character work this season finally and completely pays off. The wait until November 15 is going to be entirely and completely worth it. Now, the conversation moves to the fans. The Chosen community has been splitting hard on 2 very specific questions since this trailer dropped, and both of them deserve a real answer in the comments. First is showing Judas walking toward his end through an open field carrying a noose, the right creative decision after 5 seasons of building him as one of the most sympathetic and human characters in the entire show? Or does he deserve a more complicated and unresolved final scene that honors everything the show has invested in him? And second, will Peter's denial hit harder than the crucifixion itself for longtime viewers, simply because 5 seasons of watching that character love Jesus and swear loyalty makes the moment he fails feel more personal, more specific, and more devastating than even the cross? Both debates are already running hard in every corner of the Chosen fan community right now. The answer belongs in the comments below. The video on screen covers everything else fans need to know before the Chosen Season 6 premieres on November 15th.